Before I move on to any additional franchises, I do want to stay within like this League of Legends arcane zone I'm in right now, just because the series is over. And before I get too ahead of myself with the actual game skins, I want to take a look at some looks that I may not get to otherwise within the actual TV series. So let's talk about those. Hola, my name is X, and I like to experiment with fashion as well as talk about whatever the hell I want on social media whenever I feel like it. And in this video, it's going to be somewhat informal as I just go through some of the various characters and their outfits within the actual Arcane TV series. Spoilers, obviously, not a crazy deep dive, just kind of going over some outfits. But to build on that, I will also be taking a look at a little bit of the evolution and style range that some of the more prominent characters have, just to better facilitate more of an interesting conversation around fashion, style, and aesthetics, as well as to kind of touch on maybe a little bit of the lore. If you happen to be interested in my thoughts on the actual Arcane TV series, you can read my blog that I posted. I'll actually link this one, where I kind of go into some of the themes, some of the kind of character dynamics and arcs and relationships, and overall the resonance of the visual masterpiece that was Arcane. I just like to kind of jot down my thoughts somewhere. It also helps me really think through more of the actual character development and design and outfits. So hopefully that'll streamline a little bit of this conversation and also give you just a little more insight. I might turn this into like a separate video that might just be like YouTube member or Patreon exclusive. I'm still figuring that out. I don't even know how to approach that. But for now, I'm just going to keep this YouTube game going. Anyway, let's get to taking a look at some of these characters and their outfits. This isn't an exhaustive list, just really more so some of the outfits and the styles that stood out to me and that I feel like I can kind of cover a little more fluidly. All right, surprisingly enough, I'm going to start this off with Rictus. I've said several times I'm not the most into a character with like an armored look, but what I find interesting about his design is a little bit of the kind of contrast between something that is a little bit more warrior armor-esque, but also something that just almost gives me like a boho vibe. Just with like the pants that he's wearing, it almost feels a little harem pants like. Also with some really soft and like simple flats. Find a little bit of that kind of juxtaposition and contrast and variation in his style really interesting. Then there's Savika, and I think that with kind of a washed out dirty purple color to her style, that's what more so kind of resonated with me. It's definitely giving Zaun, where it feels a little more scrappy, kind of pulled together, a little patched. Interesting kind of compliment to Silco style in some regards. And I even like a little bit of the hardware that she has sprinkled without her design. And I think that she's an interesting, almost like shadow to Vi. She's also a very assertive, strong, kind of blurs the line with some of her gender expression kind of woman. And I think that's really interesting in any sort of character. But I absolutely had to cover Finn and his outfit. Like, that jacket is crazy. First of all, the whole outfit is just really strong and a bit more elevated than everybody else and very well coordinated, giving great body confidence with the chest. But it's really that jacket just with like the kind of spotty lapels and shoulders and just the nice contrast between the black and the yellow, while the rest of the outfit's pretty clean with those white pants. Like, very sharp, especially for a villain, and it just really stands out, again, in concert with all the other styles we typically get from Zaun. Then I wanted to cover Lest, such a quick, minor character, but maybe it's just the purple, but she just gives a little bit more of like a mystique, alluring vibe, and kind of casual, almost a little seductive. And I really enjoy that, and just the texture that she has and the layers and even just like the hardware as well. And just the gold and the purple just give opulence, even if maybe she's not the most rich character. Really would have loved to see a little bit more of her, and very curious to know about her backstory just based on the air of mystery that she maintains so strongly. And I do have to acknowledge the council members, just because obviously being the leaders of Piltover, they most certainly exhibit that high-class, opulent, elite, aristocratic style, each and every single one of them in their own way. I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but I do like that there is some variation in that design, just to show some of the range and spectrum of fashion that the citizens of Piltover are rocking and kind of rolling with. But I think that the two characters that stand out the most to me, Ballo, just because his outfit just feels a little more open and fresh. Lots of white in his clothing, and that just really helps the red pop in a much more kind of assertive way, just giving a bit of that attitude and that air of kind of arrogance and haughtiness that I think that he has to his character anyway. And of course, in just concert and combination with the gold, that's just really giving us an overall really strong, fresh, almost even youthful aesthetic compared to the others. Queen Shula, like, she stood out to me almost immediately when I saw her come on screen. Love the necklace or whatever that is going around her neck. Like, such an incredible statement piece. And even the gold claws that she has are absolutely outstanding. And the rest of the outfit's kind of really simple and pretty sleek and solid, but just with that gold hardware and detail really standing out to be the statement, it just elevates everything to such a unique level and helps give her certainly a look of her own that, I mean, easily differentiated. Now, covering additional minor characters, but some that had a little bit of like an evolution in an interesting way, starting with Milo. We see in his younger years that he definitely has that kind of plain Joe style, more scrappy, more kind of streetwear, much more down to earth and grounded. But I just think it's interesting in that alternate timeline, the evolution that we see within his style. I don't know if I want to say try hard. I don't even know like what to describe his style as, but he was already kind of like a little bit of a quirky character anyway. And so even with an elevated outfit, I just think that he has more pops of color and more layers, and almost like he's trying to be like a captain. Like he's just trying to be a little bit more large and in charge than maybe he is naturally, which I feel like was a little bit of the essence we got when he was younger, and that definitely comes through in his style. When if you contrast that with Clagor, I just think that when he was younger, it kind of gave, not doofy, like I don't know, we got such little glimpses of them. It's hard to really pin down a definitive archetype for their character, but for him, it just felt a little more kind of tall and brutish, like maybe not as much going on there. Maybe just wasn't as suave and cool as maybe like a Milo was or wanted to be. But then when we see in the alternate timeline, it's a glow up, like it's a tangible glow up. Like, is this the same person? Not to say he was a far cry from that, but maybe just with like the goggles out of the mix and just a little bit more maturity and refinement in the face and just everything. I feel like that also translated to the style. The style isn't as like over the top and try hard as I feel like Milo's is a little bit. I feel like Clagor's is a little bit more just like calm, cool, almost effortlessly cool guy. Like he's kind of channeling that spirit. And I just think that it's an interesting evolution in both of their lanes in different ways than maybe one would have initially expected. Then I want to talk about Singed. He was always kind of giving weird creeper vibes, unfortunately for him. Like even in his like younger days when he first even met Victor or when he was helping Silco, like it was always just like a more kind of toned down, washed out, muted style. Nothing really extravagant, nothing really statement. That's not really his focus. But I do like how even after like the disaster and like just the kind of shimmer explosion or whatever, he got just a little more rugged, a little more edge, a lot more. And almost to the point of just kind of being significantly cooler, in my opinion, just with more statement colors that I feel like stand out, even with like a little bit of that olive green, but most of that red scarf. It's such an interesting kind of evolution for him. Also gives like destructive and sickly, but I think it's just that maybe contrast between that red and that green that gives something a little bit more focused and a little more determined. Victor's evolution is, I feel like, pretty clear. Like it's a no-brainer. Even when he was younger, definitely a bit more undercity, definitely a bit more underprivileged, but still a touch of sophistication to his style, modest, scholarly kind of essence and framework. And we see that easily translated to when he's becomes more of an academy student in the formal wear that's very synonymous and parallel to that of Jayce's as well. Both very sophisticated gentlemen who are focused on innovation and very much supporting the Piltover vision. But we easily see that completely dropped and dismissed as he really gets absorbed within the arcane and goes full-blown cult leader. Like, it's just giving a complete detachment from who he was. It's not even as linear or as adjacent to his core style as a lot of other characters still have to theirs as they evolve and grow in their arcs. His is just completely removed. So I think that's a very clear story told with his attire. Vander is one of those down-to-earth guys with those practical styles that's always what he's had. Ever since he was younger, and even when he's at like Vi and Jinx's adolescent age, like it's pretty consistent. Most consistent between when he was younger and then kind of more so where we last remember him as in the kind of core central timeline. Just like with that shirt and almost like a leather vest. Very utilitarian, very rugged and down to earth and simple and modest. But we even see a bit of that simplicity and modesty translated into the alternate timeline as well. Like it's not as polished and even a little bit more elevated like some of the other characters have. Still has a little bit more of a kind of relaxed, basic, straightforward style, maybe slightly elevated with some of the accessories and a little bit of the cut of the shirt and how it just is a little bit different than just like a tank or a tee or a tunic. But I think he's pretty consistent in who he is in something a little bit more simplistic. When we look at Silco, I definitely think he's consistently had an edge of more sophistication and even the propensity towards the trajectory of being a little bit more high class. He's had a collared shirt. He's had a bit more of those kind of sophisticated layers, definitely some leather details and definitely some kind of more Zahn-esque kind of miscellaneous accessorizing going on. We saw that in his younger years, and we do see that even projected into the alternate timeline where he's reconciled with everybody and he's not gone full evil villain. So I don't think that when we do look at his central timeline, even evil villain attire, that it's completely out of the realm of like maybe where he was headed anyway. And I think a lot of evil villains do naturally to assert their stance and their kind of authority or their ethos, they do dress in much more elevated, extravagant styles. I love the slight variation that we get between his outfits. One that is like a bit of like a black and red kind of patchwork style with plenty of gold details and trim and lining throughout with those typical black pants and boots. But I do want to note the outfit where he has a little bit more of like a plum vest. I've said multiple times how purple, red, and black together just give that edgy, dark, badass energy and tone. And as a villain, that's obviously something that he could wear to further just reinforce that notion and reinforce a bit more of that kind of serious objective that he has. His clothes certainly speak to that, especially just with the jacket in combination with all of that. It just gives him more silhouette, more of that presence, more of that authority. And I just love how it coordinates so perfectly. Great lining, great texture, but such an extra touch of class and elevation to really stand as a true opponent to the Piltover kind of hierarchy. Kind of random and just kind of flat is talking about Heimerdinger's style. And I kind of was a little hesitant to talk about some of these characters because I mean, I don't want to ruin when I actually maybe get to some of their skins in the actual League of Legends game. But his style is interesting because it's been consistent. I think he's been one of the only characters that has worn pretty much the same outfit consistently all the way through the series, which I feel like speaks to the fact that he's very much rooted in tradition and the way things should, the old regular way things should go, to the point of being one-dimensional. I think Ekko's evolution is notable because of the additional layers and just how rugged and almost just generally rough he's gotten with his clothing. At first, it just seemed like he had such a strong level of innocence. It's like this white shirt, such an innocent little child boy, still had a little bit of an attitude, still had some bite to him. But we just see a lot of that shed just based on all of the trauma and all of the struggle and all of the leadership that he had to step into and being an advocate for Zahn and being a proponent of resistance. We just see so many more layers, stripped of that innocence, much more kind of colors that are rooted within the earth. And I think even just the general Zahn aesthetic, especially within his full firelight, like attire and getup, which I think it just is a very great urban streetwear, street style aesthetic in general. Something that he might have already had the trajectory for, but just something that I think also he adorns out of just basic survival and just having to rise to the charge. And I say that because when we look at the alternate timeline, he does still, I think, have a little bit more of also an effortlessly cool guy kind of style, similar to Clagor in the future Zon that wasn't so destructed, but it's very polished and sophisticated. Similar to Jinx, when we get there, it just shows the different trajectory one can go with their style based on the life experiences that they've been through. And I think it's a definite, there's parallels with the color of green, but there's definite contrast in something that's much more polished. And Bessa is pretty clear with her style. She is no nonsense, ruthless, cold, and combat focused. She is in it for power. She is in it to win. She's in it for victory. The red screams that throughout her various outfits, and the general neutral tones just gives a flat, focused, disciplined energy that we've even seen her discuss within the series. I think that one of my favorite looks of hers is where she has this incredible headpiece and her hair is braided within and around it with like a very strong military jacket around her shoulders. Like, it just screams assertive, dominant combat leader, and one who was absolutely not to be messed with. But also her other outfits just give combat ready. Like, she's ready to go. At the drop of the dime, she's in it to win it. And just the red is so aggressive and blaring in her style, which I feel like it speaks to that aggression that she has as a cold-blooded warrior. Even though I think I got a little like hyped on Caitlyn because I just know her from League of Legends game and all of her various skins, when we look at all of the different styles that she's adorned within the Arcane series, like, she's really kind of a bit more one-dimensional than I would have expected, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but like, she is kind of who she is, and she's very focused on her mission as being an officer. Even from an early age, she had that very polished, put together, very sophisticated steampunk Victorian kind of style. And that only really continued into her older years. And even throughout the different outfits that she has, it's pretty focused on utility with that kind of elegance being the secondary. Love her purple. But I mean, just, it's really the same outfit, different day, if we actually really were to break it down. I like her commander, I think, outfit a bit the most out of everything, including the blue uniform that she has, where they're kind of an enforcer kind of squad and team. But otherwise, it's like, we know what we're going to get from her. We're going to get something that has maybe a little bit of ruffle, plenty of purple, but ultimately, and some brown too, leather and brown and utility components. But it's really just focused on streamlined design and form fit in order to accomplish her officer duties. Vi is pretty much the same. Like, I've already talked about Caitlyn and Vi in their own dedicated videos, but it's just like, I do appreciate how she does kind of toe that line and blend between a bit of that Zon and Piltover influence. Some of the elements that she has outside of her gauntlets does kind of give Piltover structure and coordination, but she does have some thrown together kind of utility functional elements that does root her more in that resourcefulness of a Zon kind of spirit. We also see that where she has her own kind of blue enforcer squad uniform, just kind of showing that she can blend and integrate into a bit more of that side of fashion and style. But I also like when she shakes it up and got a little more rock and roll, even if it was like a depressive, destructive phase where she was in her kind of brawler mode, and she just had a little bit more of that kind of biker, raw, edgy style. Already talked about Jayce, but I guess I just, outside of being a snack attack, I just appreciate that he just maintains such a consistent layer of elevation, especially for a male character. So fashionable and just so polished and prim. We see that from when he was an academy student, even within his a little bit more of like a science lab coat kind of inventor outfit with the double breast. It just still feels more fashion and elevated, and like, just, you could easily dress it up with a jacket or additional kind of clothing items to kind of give it even more opulence and eliteness. But even in the midst of tragedy, I still like that he's able to still look so good. Like, even after the trauma of being an arcane survivor, we still see that he wears a nice long white coat and the rest of his outfit's kind of well. It looks a little bit more rugged, but it still is exuding that high class. And he also has like a navy blue kind of shirt when he's in that mode as well, despite looking kind of bearded and shaggy in the hair. Like, he still is giving opulence and high class leader. And I just love that that's such a consistent thread through his style, just showing he is who he is all the way through. So I was really interested and eager to talk about Mel, because I feel like she really does capture that like wolf and lamb kind of contrast and juxtaposition and relationship really well if you actually look at it. But if we looked at her when she was younger, obviously she was all about that kind of very elegant, very refined, form-fit silhouette gown type style. But there was blue in the mix, which I almost feel like gave a hint of innocence and was an interesting contrast to the red of her mother. So we already kind of saw that she was a little bit different in that regard. But in her more adult years, still very elegant, lots of white within her core kind of gown that just kind of gives a little bit more of that lamb. But there's always a consistent element of black and white to her style, as we see with a little bit of that sheer black kind of element around her, the top of her chest and her neck, in addition to so much gold, just to further convey that luxury and that status that she is at and that she functions within. But she also wears like a black dress, I think, when she's trying to be a little more alluring and political, to show that there is a little bit of a wolf lurking around. She's not just this innocent, elegant dove or lamb. She does have a little bit more of a cunning, calculated side to her, even if maybe it's just not as combat focused like her mother is. But I feel like we really see this concept come to life when she's fully manifested her powers. She initially kind of goes around in a white cloak, kind of giving mage, kind of giving healer. But then we see that when she sheds it, she's wearing a fitted black bodysuit. The wolf is, it's giving wolf in sheep's clothing, where she can come out and be an enforcer and a protector and assert some strength if she absolutely needs to, which she does, which makes her mother proud. But it's just like, there is that duality there. And I love how it's kind of slowly permeated over time within her clothing. But then we have Jinx, and I think even at a young age, she did display a sense of whimsy to her style. She was always a little bit of a quirky, kind of oddball kind of girl anyway. She was her own. And we see that with like the color choices. She had that little bit of purple stripe situation going on, a little bit of the kind of patchy, layered kind of style that she even maintained in her adult years. But then we definitely see much more body confidence and I don't really care kind of attitude come through in her clothing, because she's fully stepped into just owning her circumstances and just, it is what it is, which I like that for her. And I don't think it's out of the realm of who she could be, but I definitely think that it's taken in a different direction because of what she's been through. Because when we look at the alternate timeline, that's where I really wanted to double tap, because I've already talked about Jinx too. Her outfit in the alternate timeline still gives individual, it still gives personal style. It's very unique, and it's not like everybody else's style is like outfitting. It has some of her consistent colored elements in the mix, definitely elevated, but also still gives a touch of like maybe body confidence only in the arms, but a little bit of that rugged kind of like edgy girl, alternative girl style and tone. But I love that doesn't have to be so dramatic. It doesn't have to be edgelord type in order to convey that she maybe does have a little bit of that spirit. It just is a matter of the circumstances that kind of help define someone's style. And I think that we definitely see that carry through when she wears that white dress with like that black leather jacket. Like that, I think, was just the cherry on top to me to show that like, it really helped me get to know who she could fully be. I think it really rounded out her potential. She is soft, she is feminine, she is a sweet girl, but she still has just a little bit of that edge to her, maybe as a result of what she's been through, but I think just also a bit of her attitude that's always kind of been there. So I just love that alternate timeline for her especially. I feel like that's a really great reflection of her full potential. Anyway, would love to hear your thoughts on these outfits and these styles, but obviously more League of Legends to come. I'm going to shift over to Cyberpunk 2077 after this, but until the next video, I'll talk to you later.